through the 1700s, which means the 18th century, so 18th century, science was developing unabated, and various old ideas and unscientific ideas were dispelled slowly through various experimental studies, experimental investigation and checking whether these are true or not, and through that science was steadily progressing. A glimpse of that we have heard in the last class, but I am not going into the details. But what I am trying to point out is that in this period, in the 18th century, science was developing with a philosophical grounding, and the philosophical grounding was provided by the idea of mechanical materialism that I have come across in the last class. Mechanical materialism. The main idea of mechanical materialism was that the world is sort of composed of, since it is materialism, world is composed of matter, but the whole picture was like a machine. The world was viewed like a machine, and each individual thing are viewed as sort of a part of a machine. And the mechanical materialists tried to explain everything in terms of the properties and interaction of these parts. I will come to a bit more detail a little later. And the second philosophical grounding was provided by what is known as metaphysics. Metaphysics is a way of thinking that was again developed in the antiquity, and in that way of view, things are studied as they are. As they are means, it is assumed that each thing has a property which we have to study, but a fixed property. So, everything is fixed, they are not something that are changing, everything has a fixed character, and this is what we study. And the logical grounding, since we have to argue by using logic, the logical grounding was provided by what is known as formal logic. Now, this formal logic, again it was started by Socrates, but formalized by Aristotle. It is basically a way of logical argument, logical thinking, which seeks to eliminate any possibility of ambiguity. And for that purpose, Aristotle made the point that everything is what it is and is not something else. A is A and not equal to B. So, it had three laws: the law of identity, the law of negation, law of identity said that if you are trying to describe something, understand something whose property you are trying to understand, define that entity, and it is that and that only. For example, if you are defining, if you are talking about a tree, then a tree is a tree only. It is not a shrub, it is not a vine, it is not a sapling. So, each of these are different things. So, law of negation is saying that this is saying that essentially A is equal to A only, and law of negation is saying A is not equal to another thing B. Okay. So, if it is if you have defined something, then it goes as a part of the logical structure that that thing is not at the same time something else, And to further clarify, the third law was the law of excluded middle. Which means that there is, if there is an A and if there is something B, then nothing in between. So, the in between there is nothing, okay. Which means there is nothing that is at the same time A as well as B. There is nothing which is at the same time a tree as well as a shrub. There is nothing which is at the same time a mammal as well as a reptile, something like that. So, these laws together with the idea of metaphysics, you can easily see that this allows one to study things as they are, and that is what happened. People studied things means the inanimate objects, the biological objects as they are. And with that you can probe the properties of, say, oxygen, you can probe the characters of certain animals and things like that. But metaphysics assumed that the character, property and whatever we study, these are fixed, these are not changing. And therefore, a metaphysics way of thinking in common parlance would identify a particular person as good, a particular person as bad, and it would not assume or it goes out of the assumption that a good person may at some point of time turn into a bad one, or a bad person may turn into a good one. So, changing character was out of the purview of the philosophy of metaphysics. So, you can see that the formal logical structure uses an either or kind of logic. Either or. So, it is either this or that, but nothing can be something in between. So, with that kind of philosophical grounding, A, mechanical materialism, B, metaphysics, and 3, formal logic, science was progressing. And through that various developments happened, but over the first or over a period, I would say more accurately, over a period from about 1830 to about 1860. In this period, various great developments happened in science. First, we learnt about cell theory. Cell theory that said that cell is a building block of biological matter. Cell is a building block. It said that a cell can be born only out of a cell. So on and so forth, and cells are born, cells develop, they go through evolution, and then at some point in time they die, and every animal body is composed of one or more cells. Cell is the building block. We learnt about this is by the work of Schleiden, Schwann, Virchow, and others. The electromagnetic theory was developed in this period by the work of Oersted, Henry, Ampere, Ohm, Gauss, and people like that. And finally, it was crowned by the great experimentalist Michael Faraday, who showed that the interaction between electricity and magnetism is dynamic, not static. Only a flowing charge can induce magnetism, and only a changing magnetic field can induce a flow of charge. So, and these ideas were put into a mathematical form by Maxwell. So, this is what happened in this period, and Maxwell's book paper came around 1859 or so. So, in this period. Thermodynamics that was also developing in this period through the work of, say, Mayer, Helmholtz, Carnot, Sadi Carnot, and finally Clausius. Through their work, we came to know that all forms of energy are interconvertible, but when you are trying to convert a low quality energy, which is somewhat dispersed form of energy like heat, into a high quality energy, which is more organized and regular form of energy like the rotation of a shaft or electricity flowing through a wire, then you cannot convert it at 100% efficiency, and so some part of energy goes into the environment, and that idea was formalized by Clausius into the first law and the second law of thermodynamics. So, all these were developing, right, and most importantly evolution, evolution theory in biology by Darwin in the main. Through these changes that happened, Darwin's book also came out around 1859. So, through these we first time came to a situation where these philosophical groundings started to prove inadequate to understand the property of matter that was being revealed. Why? Because in all these the focus was changing from studying things to we are first time realizing that the matter that we are studying is continuously going through changes, evolving. Nothing is static, nothing has a fixed property. All these things are changing, and not only that, things are coming into being, evolving, and then going out of being. Each cell comes into being, evolves, and goes out of being. Each organism comes into being, evolves, and goes out of being. Each species comes into being, evolves, and then becomes extinct, so on and so forth. Everything in the view of this time that was revealed was that things are continuously changing. Things do not have fixed properties, and the view of metaphysics that we should study things as they are, and as they are, that thing, if that continuously changes, obviously you cannot talk about a fixed property, fixed characteristic. So, we had a difficulty there, and formal logic also ran into difficulty. For example, in the formal logic, everything is viewed in terms of either or. It is either A or B. There is nothing that can be at the same time A as well as B. But in this period, biologists came across for the first time an animal called platypus, which you know that the reptiles lay eggs and the mammals suckle their young, and there is a hard division between them. So, A and B separate, but platypus they lay eggs as well as suckle their young. So, where do you put them? So, we started to find that there are certain things that are in both bins. It was necessary for biology to put everything in bins. Bins like birds, bins like reptiles, bins like trees, bins like mammals. So, it was necessary in order to organize their knowledge, but it was slowly being revealed that the division between the bins are not so hard and fast. There is a possibility that something can have some properties of this bin and some properties of that bin. In that case, formal logic has a difficulty. It was also found that what was earlier A can in some situations behave as B. Same thing, water in some situation can behave as ice, a different thing, right. So, something can change from one to the other. A seed can at some point of time germinate into a tree, and seed is not the same as the tree. So, something that was one thing can change into another. It is not that people earlier did not come across changing things. We see night and the day, we see the calf are born and they grow into cows and they ultimately die, people saw that. But from an idealistic point of view, all changes, if you one subscribe to the idea of idealism, then all changes happen with a purpose, according to them. Since Darwin showed that the whole evolution is happening without any purpose, it was happening by very well defined laws of nature, the law of natural selection, and therefore there is nothing like a purpose for which the evolution is happening. So, evolution then had to come to the evolution, or change had to come to the center point of all studies. And when things came to the center point of all studies, then we had to change the notion. The way the science was progressing, assuming certain philosophical grounding, they needed to be changed. So, as I told you, people did see changes, but in the idealist view, things change with an objective, with a purpose. While in the view of mechanical materialism, things change, of course, but they try to study all changes in terms of the ultimate building block of everything, and they pictured everything as sort of made of hard impenetrable particles, and they try to understand all the various behavior in nature in terms of the properties and the interaction between those hard impenetrable particles. And what does the universe comprise? The universe comprised infinite number of, very large number of such hard impenetrable particles. So, their view was that if you want to study something, look at what it is composed of. Like mechanical materialism is mechanical, which means that it sees everything as a machine, and like every machine is composed of parts. Each part moves or behaves according to some fixed laws, and the parts interact with each other to behave like something that is the machine. And therefore, if you look at anything like a machine, what would you do? You will basically find out what the component parts are and how they interact with each other, and that you will try to understand everything in terms of the component parts and their interaction, and that way you will believe that the understanding of that thing can be obtained. Effectively, it was saying that the behavior of the parts, if you sum them together, sum is essentially the behavior of the whole. So, sum of the parts is equal to the whole. This picture was best expressed by a Newtonian scientist, Laplace, after whom you see the Laplace transform and various things that go after the name of Laplace. He was a great mathematician and physicist, basically worked on classical celestial mechanics. He wrote a book in which he said that just give me the initial position and momenta of all the particles in this universe and give me enough computing power, I can tell you what is going to happen to the universe ever in future. And what was the basis of his assertion? Basis of the assertion was that the understanding that all that can happen is nothing but the sum total of the behavior of the small particles, and if I can calculate the position and the trajectory of each particle, then I can calculate the whole. Now, in this period that I was talking about, as we were going through these developments, it was realized that no, the whole is not just a sum of the parts. Simple. A cell consists of millions of molecules. But if you simply go and study what molecules are there, what are their properties and how they react with each other, will you be able to infer the character of the cell? No. The cell has a definite action, property, behavior, and a cell interacts with other cells in a particular way that cannot be inferred just by looking at the what is composed of, their properties. So, the cell as a whole has an emergent property which cannot be inferred by looking at the parts. So, the sum of the parts is not the same as the whole. So, this idea came during this time. So, mechanical materialism was trying to understand everything in terms of breaking things into parts and understanding the behavior of the parts, but that might not really help. So, the picture that the world is composed of hard impenetrable particles, and if you can somehow understand how they behave and how they interact, everything is done, that idea came into a problem. Then every part needs a motive force, and every part moves with some fixed laws. That was the assertion of mechanical materialism, and therefore, they tried to find out what the forces are, what the fixed laws are, that each component, each individual part obeys. And there is another issue there with mechanical materialism. If you look at a machine, it has the parts, look at the wristwatch, it has parts which go around, but they repeat the same motion endlessly. Endless repetition of the same kind of motion, that is the part, that is the character of a machine. But in this period, we are realizing that that is not quite true, because evolution happens. Evolution means something changes to another thing, and that cannot be understood in terms of endless repetition of the same process. So, mechanical materialism, we were starting to realize that mechanical materialism will not serve the purpose. Metaphysics, on the other hand, as I said, it was talking about things in abstraction. Abstraction, well, all thoughts are abstract thoughts. There cannot be no thought that is not abstract thought. I am not talking about just abstraction, I am talking about the property of something, character of something, they are trying to understand as abstracted from the condition of existence. So, iron, they would say iron is hard, without referring to its condition of existence, its temperature and things like that. A man is good, that boy is intelligent, irrespective of, without referring to the condition of existence. And this way of thinking, so it was diverse from reality, and it was believed that everything has some kind of inherent property, and they tried to study that inherent property. While in reality, with these developments, it was realized that these are not inherent properties, properties actually evolve, and through interaction with the environment, a human also evolves in interaction with the human's environment. So, everything was assumed to be given, fixed, stable, but we were slowly coming to realize that things are not given, things are not fixed, things are not stable, things are always changing, and things are always coming into being, evolving and going out of being. So, so we have seen that all three philosophical groundings were challenged by the developments that happened during this period. And with that, a new kind of philosophy was taking birth.